Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones, back here today as Purdue survives and advances. For the fourth time in the past 5 NCAA tournaments, the Boilers are headed to the Sweet 16 and the second weekend. This time, however, Purdue will play 15-seeded St. Peter's for the chance to move on to the Elite Eight. Today we'll look back at Purdue's time in Milwaukee with plenty of thoughts on the wins over Yale and Texas. Then we'll take a look at St. Peter's and what's to come in Philadelphia before answering some of your questions. Now, just a heads up, with the game not ending till late last night, this is going to be a little bit more freestyled than usual. I have fewer notes than I normally do. You don't know how this podcast is going to go until that game ends, because the tone of a podcast previewing the Sweet 16 is much different than the tone of a podcast addressed to a very angry fan base after a round of 32 loss. So, had to wait to start putting this one together, but, we'll still have some good stuff here. So, let's hop on in. First, as always, if you don't already, follow the show on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Plenty of stuff to talk about there. There is no shortage of stuff to talk about here with Purdue preparing for the Sweet 16. The other games are going to be fantastic. We'll be talking about all of those on Twitter this week. And if you don't already, subscribe to Boilers and Beyond wherever you get your podcasts. We're available anywhere, and we are coming to you with regular content even over the summer. Basketball is either going to end this week or next. Could end 2 weeks from tonight, Monday night, as I'm recording, for all we know. But we'll have plenty of stuff looking ahead to the future of Purdue basketball. Spring football is going to be having the spring game here soon, so plenty of stuff to talk about even after the season ends. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of that. All right, let's dive on into Milwaukee. Purdue opened up on Friday with the first game of the day in that Milwaukee site at Fiserv Forum and took care of Yale very handily, 78-56. There's not all that much to say about this game. Look, Yale wasn't all that good. Azar Swain was a good player, and he got hot for them early. What did he have? He had 11 or 13 pretty quick points, but then he really slowed down. And when he wasn't going, they had a 9-minute scoring drought there early on in the second half. And he hit some tough shots. Yale as a whole hit some really tough shots to stay in that game early. They had the little a shovel pass 3-pointer that went in. Swain hit a few tough shots, had a couple shots towards the end of the shot clock that went in from guys who aren't great shooters. That combined with Purdue missing some 3-pointers early on, that prevented Purdue from just blowing this one open early on. Purdue still led by 13 at half and cruised in the second half to victory. Even got the walk-ons in, which is always nice to see in the NCAA tournament. That is a rarity that every team would love to have, to be up by so much that you can get those guys in the game to say they saw the floor in an NCAA tournament game. But yeah, Purdue dominated an overmatched Yale team. They had no answer for Zach Edey. He was way too big. They had no answer for Jaden Ivey. He was way too much of an NBA prospect. He had a great first half in that game, really gave Yale some fits, and he knocked down some threes, which was always nice to see. Then the game that really mattered, and I tweeted this Sunday morning when I got up because it's exactly how I felt. I said that game, Purdue versus Texas, may have been the most pressure that's ever been on a Purdue team to win. in Purdue basketball history. Now, I say that knowing that there's been plenty of other occasions. 1988 losing early on, 1996 losing early on. Those were some tough ones. But this group, the first group to be number one at Purdue, a group that had very high expectations. There was a lot of pressure. A round of 32 exit would have lit the fan base on fire. I know that much. Twitter would have been a mess. The message boards would have been a mess. It would have been a bad couple weeks for Purdue basketball and just the mood of the fan base. So there was a lot of pressure there, and Purdue delivered. I think it's important to note the old saying, and it's completely accurate. The NCAA tournament is all about matchups. That's what it comes down to, is who you get matched up against. You're going to have weaknesses. They're going to have weaknesses. Who can exploit the other team's weaknesses better? And Purdue got a matchup that I didn't like. I thought it was a poor matchup for Purdue. I thought there was a lot of reason to be concerned if you were Purdue. Texas was a team that would pressure the hell out of the ball. Purdue's ball handlers up, 25, 30 feet from the basket. They had a bunch of seniors. They started 5 seniors. I never liked playing against a senior-laden team in March. Purdue survived a bad matchup and flipped it on them very well. Purdue used Texas's defensive tenacity completely against them. That was an excellent job by Purdue. They forced it inside and got Texas in foul trouble early. Timmy Allen, their leading scorer, barely played for them because he fouled out with like 6 minutes to go. Andrew Jones was in foul trouble. Courtney Ramey was in foul trouble. Purdue did a great job there. And at the end of the day, Purdue defeated a good team. The Chris Beard storyline was certainly there. TNT or TBS, whichever channel the game was on, they made sure you knew about the fact that Chris Beard had beaten Matt Painter twice in the NCAA tournament already. They showed the Little Rock highlights. That one brought back bad memories. The 2018 game with Texas Tech, I think, is different just because Isaac Haas got hurt a week prior. But nonetheless, it's not good memories for Purdue. And Purdue got that little bit of a monkey off its back. And Purdue moves on to the Sweet 16 for the 4th time in 5 tournaments. Only Gonzaga and Michigan have been to all 5. So, the narrative that Purdue doesn't get it done in March depends on what getting it done means. But, getting to the second weekend 4 times out of 5 tournaments, and what really is 4 times out of 6 tournaments, because if there was a tournament in 2020, Purdue wouldn't have been in it, let alone in the Sweet 16. But nonetheless, that's a very good stat. Purdue has done a very good job of late, minus the North Texas season, of at least getting to that second weekend. Once you get there, anything is possible. Some thoughts from up in Milwaukee. And it has to start with the story of the game yesterday. And that was, well, maybe not the story, but Jaden Ivey's shot. The 28-foot three-pointer that put Purdue ahead by 6 with a minute to go, that really did off a Texas run that put the game in question for Purdue. Purdue was up 10 with 2.5 minutes to play. Texas cut that to 3 with a little over a minute to go, and Ivey drilled a triple to ultimately put it away. That was the difference in the game there. Look, he's special. I encourage Purdue fans to enjoy the game on Friday because every time now on, it could be the last time you see Jaden Ivey in a Purdue uniform. This is it. There is no doubt he's going to the NBA this year, so enjoy it. There is no guarantee that you get another player this dynamic at Purdue. Purdue is not historically had guys like this. Carson Edwards was not this dynamic. Glenn Robinson was pretty dynamic, but Jaden Ivey is just special. He has ability that Purdue really hasn't seen before. Enjoy it because it's a heck of a ride. You get some bad sometimes. There was some bad mixed in that first half against Texas. There were some turnovers. There was, at one point, a pull-up three from the logo that was completely unnecessary. But you take that with someone who has a killer instinct that I don't know that Purdue has seen in some time, and a killer instinct that I don't know that anyone else on this team really has. That's why the ball is going to be in his hands anytime Purdue has to have a bucket here in the rest of this tournament. To this point, and I can only say to this point because we'll talk about this more in the Q&A, but it could change. But so far, Purdue's big man advantage is really, really showing because of the way the game is being officiated. The game, fouls are being called fouls, and that's really helping Purdue because a lot of times there is significant contact that in the rule book is a foul in Big Ten games that simply does not get called a foul. And Purdue's getting that right now. That is why Purdue shot 46 free throws, was it, against Texas? 46 free throws. That's why Purdue got that many, because the putting two hands in the back of Zach Edey was called a foul. The hip checks out 25 feet from the basket against Purdue's guards were called a foul. But look, there aren't many teams in America that are going to be able to have anything remotely stack up with Purdue's front line. And one of those few teams got bounced by St. Peter's last Thursday. So Purdue's really got a huge advantage here. And when you have two of them, it changes the entire game because we've seen it already here. Zach Edey was the better player against Yale. Travion Williams did not have a great game, I didn't think. And then that flips for the Texas game. Edey was fine. He was getting fouled like crazy. But Travion Williams was unbelievable. Goes for 24 points on 10 of 13 shooting, has 7 rebounds. That's really good. 22 points. That was the minutes category there. But, 22 points. I mean, that's insane. That's a great game for someone who only played 25 minutes, 24 minutes. So you're seeing that advantage, and you're seeing it, a team like Texas, who's small to begin with, but they didn't have guys to put down there. They stuck Dessou down there. They stuck Christian Bishop and Timmy Allen down there, but they didn't get anything going against them. Texas's bigs could not stop Purdue. They had to foul a ton, and that changed the complexion of the game. I thought probably, as I took it back talking about Jaden Ivey, I think the story of the game for Purdue was Ethan Morton. That was as unsung of a performance as you can ask for. Ethan Morton came in there in the second half and, for the most part, shut down Marcus Carr. Marcus Carr is a guy who is just a very, very skilled, experienced, and twitchy player. He's able to get off the dribble, get into a shooting position, and knock down shots with the best of them. And Ethan Morton did an excellent job of taking away his right hand, making him go left, and getting the ball out of his hands. Morton was excellent there. He did a really good job in the Yale game on Azar Swain. Morton picked him up some in the second half after Hunter did fine against Swain, but Morton raised that level and really took away Swain. led completely to that massive scoring drought that Yale suffered in the first half of that game. Morton's going to be a huge player for Purdue. Just the way he plays defense, he's probably, well, he is Purdue's best defender next year as of right now. I still think Eric Hunter's a great defender right now, but I mean, he could be an all Big Ten defensive guy someday. I think he's going to have a huge year next year. He is a role player in every sense of the term, but you saw what he can do in the fact that he knocks down 2 open threes. He knocks down a couple free throws late in the game. He's battling on the glass. He's playing good defense. I mean, he does everything you want him to do. And he's a big part of why right now you look at it and say, hey, the defense is getting a little better. Down to 88th in adjusted defensive efficiency on KenPom. That was like 100 a week ago. So things are getting better for Purdue on that side of the ball. And a major part of that goes to Ethan Morton. On the offensive side of the ball, look, if you'd have told me that Sasha Stefanovic would still be ice cold and Purdue would be in the Sweet 16, I'd have been rather surprised. But that's reality here. Stefanovic struggled again shooting the ball against Texas. Went 0 for 4 from the field, all of those threes. But, goes 4 for 5 at the line, pulls down 5 rebounds, had an excellent blocked shot. He's still bringing energy. He's still bringing something to the table. But at the end of the day, Purdue's probably going to need some shots from him to keep winning. If not Friday, they may not need it Friday. But to get to the Final Four, they're going to need some production from Stefanovic. He's an elite shooter. That fact has still not changed. He's in one heck of a slump right now. That could be easily busted out of real quick. That can change in a moment's notice. Purdue would love for that to happen because when Sasha Stefanovic is knocking down jump shots, that makes Purdue's offense all that more deadly because it frees up more room for Jaden Ivey and it frees up more room for those big men to go to work. Speaking of big men, the one we haven't talked about, Caleb Furst, quietly an excellent couple of games for him up in Milwaukee against Yale. He turns in 10 points off the bench, 2 of 2 from the field, 5 of 6 at the line, 4 rebounds, a couple of steals. He was really good there. And then he comes back against Texas, and he only had 4 points. But the three-pointer he hit to spark a little bit of Purdue momentum when they really needed it, that was huge stuff. I'm telling you, I tweeted it out during the game on Friday. He is going to have an excellent career at Purdue. I have zero doubt about that. He has all the tools you want. I think he is long-term. I've said this all year. Long-term, I think he's a 5. I think he'll get those minutes behind Edey next year that Travion Williams is currently sharing. I think he's going to be better at the 5 than he is the 4, just because the way some of those matchups have been flipped on Purdue this year, where you kind of expose an immobile center, I think Caleb Furst gives you the ability to do that to other teams, kind of like Matt Harms did when he was at Purdue. And if you remember, that team when Matt Harms was the center and Purdue ran a lot of stuff outside, Purdue went to the Elite 8 that year and won the Big Ten. So there's a number of ways to win games, and Caleb Furst might give you another dimension that you can use to your advantage at times. Finally, the last thing, free throws. Because when you shoot 46 of them in a game, you're going to have thoughts on them. And as a whole, 33 of 46, 71% for Purdue, that's acceptable. That is right at your season average, if not a little bit below, or a little bit above, sorry. A lot of your free throws tend to get taken by your big guys, and in this game, 7 for 12 for Zach Edey, probably like that to be 8 or 9, 2 for 4 for Travion Williams, that's reality, but, Jaden Ivey, 8 for 9, Eric Hunter, 8 for 9, Stefanovic, 4 for 5, that's all big. And if this tournament's going to keep getting called the way it is, Purdue's going to have the chance to win games at the free throw line, but it's also going to have the chance to lose games at the free throw line. And against Texas, had things gone a little bit differently down the stretch, and Jaden Ivey missed that three-pointer, and Marcus Carr go down to the other end and do what Marcus Carr does, to cut it to one or tie the game, and, the game ultimately results in Texas winning. One of the big things we'd be pointing at right now is the number of times that Purdue went 1 for 2 at the free throw line. I don't have that number in front of me, but it sure felt like a lot. And anytime you're in a close game, that's the stuff you can look at. Purdue did a fine job in the 1-on-1s. It was Texas who did not. They missed a couple of front ends in the first half. That helps Purdue keep the lead into halftime. And, you look back at that, it's a whole different ballgame if Texas at least gets 2 points when they got 0. But, that was an excellent win for Purdue. That's all there is to say. Chris Beard is an excellent coach. That team is very good, even if they didn't have the season that they hoped to. Obviously, they were very highly regarded and didn't end up working out that way. But now you move on to Philadelphia. And you probably like the fact that it's a Friday-Sunday rather than a Thursday-Saturday. Give you an extra day of rest after a pretty intense game against Texas. That physical style of play takes a toll on you a little bit. So you have an extra day of rest and get the Cinderella story of the NCAA tournament, the St. Peter's Peacocks. Now, I don't know how many of you had heard of St. Peter's coming into this. I had, because Purdue played them about a decade ago, but not many folks have. It is a tiny little school up in Jersey City, New Jersey, and they're going to take on Purdue in the Sweet 16. Now, we talked about this last week. Hey, maybe some of Purdue's luck is changing around it, because we brought up that the only time Purdue had a seed line upset around it was 2011. That's a lot of tournaments ago, and that was when VCU went from first 4 to final 4, knocking out Purdue in the round of 32 in the process. St. Peter's comes into this, though. They are 21-11 on the season, won the MAAC tournament to get to this point. Look, they're an interesting group, because a lot of times with these teams that make a run, they have a guy who is their hands-down best player. But you don't really have that. Daryl Banks III leads them with 11 points a game. Casey and Defo tosses in 10.5. Doug Eater, who has been kind of the story here, he scores 9.5. I mean, this is a team that only scores 67 points a game. They're much better on the defensive end than what most of these mid-majors are. But again, they're a little bit size-prone, shall we say. Casey and Defoe's 6'7", under 200 pounds. Drame is 6'7", under 200 pounds. So, Purdue's going to have a decided advantage inside in this game. It just really, at the end of the day, Purdue plays well. I would be utterly stunned if Purdue loses to St. Peter's. That is if Purdue plays well. If Purdue goes on one of its turnover crusades where they turn it over 7 of 10 possessions like they did against Iowa, or 5 out of 6 possessions like they did against Indiana at Mackey, anything can happen. You leave the door wide open for the Peacocks to make something happen. But a couple things I really like here. Number one, obviously, St. Peter's has time to cool off. They take down Kentucky on Thursday. It's straight business at that point. You're back in the hotel room. You're prepping for who ended up being Murray State. You're preparing for that game. You go play another one. Now, You're the Cinderella that's going to the second weekend. You've got all the interviews. You're probably doing the Good Morning America, the Today Show, the Sports Center interviews, doing all sorts of radio stuff. I know Shaheen Holloway was on the Dan Dockett show today for really no reason, but that's where you're at. I'm looking here at their ESPN page, and John Shire and Shaheen Holloway are being interviewed on the Keyshawn Johnson show. I mean, that's the stuff that happens, and your focus starts to drift. And if that's not enough reason for your focus to drift, all indications are Shaheen Holloway's out the door here as soon as they lose this game. The Seton Hall job just became open as Kevin Willard left for Maryland. Seton Hall has their eyes on Shaheen Holloway, who was a standout at Seton Hall a couple decades ago. So it all adds up. St. Peter's has a lot to overcome to stay focused. And then just to win the game, they have a lot to overcome. They're good on defense, but they haven't seen size like Purdue has. They're good on defense, but they haven't seen a guard like Jaden Ivey. They were extremely susceptible to size against Kentucky. Oscar Tshiebwe had 30 and 16 on him. Kentucky's guards let him down. Those guards did not play well at all. Purdue's going to have to get good guard play. But all in all, there is not a more favorable Sweet 16 matchup you're really ever going to find than what Purdue has. And that's part of what put so much pressure on Purdue to beat Texas in the first place. If Purdue had Kentucky waiting here in the Sweet 16, it wouldn't have been as much of a freak out if it didn't go Purdue's way. Part of what contributed to that is the fact that you have the 15-seeded Peacocks waiting, and that game's Friday at 7:09 Eastern. That's on CBS, so going to be a big one there. And then joining Purdue and St. Peter's in the East Region semifinals, you've got UCLA and North Carolina. Now, Purdue's a strong basketball program. St. Peter's is not historically. And then you have two of the blue bloods there, UCLA and North Carolina. That's going to be a good game. It's a 4-seed versus an 8-seed. Don't let that fool you. UCLA just got to the Final Four last year. They're not coming in under anyone's radar. Now, a key for them, Jaime Jaquez, one of the stars of that Final Four team, he rolled his ankle last week in the round of 32 game against St. Mary's. His health is going to be critical. If he can go and if he's 100%, you got to like what UCLA can do. If not, North Carolina's playing their best basketball of the season at the best possible time. That's who Purdue would have waiting if they can get by St. Peter's. I don't know how much you can ask for more than this. You're the highest remaining seed left. You are in a fairly good spot. You are the betting favorite to come out of the East region and go to your first Final Four in 42 years. It's not going to be easy by any means. St. Peter's is going to give you everything they have, and then you're going to get a quality opponent. This is a much better team than the one Purdue saw in North Carolina in November. Even without Dawson Garcia now, they're still better than they were at that point. And this is a good UCLA team with a lot of skill. It won't be easy, but I don't know that you can ask for a more favorable path to the Final Four. And you already know, if Purdue gets by St. Peter's on Friday, the anticipation is going to be nuts. If Purdue loses to St. Peter's on Friday, you're going to have one of the most demoralizing defeats that you'll ever find. That would be a legitimate knife to the heart for Purdue fans, but everything is as favorable as Purdue could have wanted it. You finally got some luck in terms of what happens around you. Now we'll see if Purdue can use that luck and use it as fuel to the Final Four. All right, now, as we do every week, let's dive on into the Q&A. If you don't If you don't follow the show on Twitter, follow us there at Boilers Beyond. I put out a tweet every week for you all to send questions in. And if something comes up, while you're listening to the show or something that you want answered before I tweet next week, just send me a DM whenever. The DMs are always open, so just shoot me a note whenever, and I will add it to the list of questions to answer. But, first off, we got a pretty good question because it's certainly on people's minds as Ethan Morton has been very good lately. At what point does he replace Sasha Stefanovic in the starting lineup or in minutes? And the one thing I will say about this is that replacing someone in the starting lineup and replacing some of their minutes can be two different things. Because in the game yesterday against Texas, Ethan Morton took a number of Sasha Stefanovic's minutes in that second half. Now, when the game got close later on in crunch time, you had Morton at the 4, Stefanovic at the 3. You had that for a little bit of time. So it all really depends on the matchup in terms of how minutes are going to be distributed. Morton's defense, by all means, has put him in an excellent spot to play more minutes. I would be stunned if Morton replaced Sasha Stefanovic in the starting lineup at this point. That's just a continuity thing that I don't think you really want to mess with in the NCAA tournament. You can replace the minutes, to some degree. You're still going to keep Stefanovic out there. He's still, a knockdown shooter that teams have to respect, even if he hasn't knocked down a lot of shots lately. Teams aren't going to slack off him and just let him shoot. I don't know if the finger's still a problem. I don't know what the deal is there, but I'd be very surprised if he doesn't knock down some more shots here before his time at Purdue is over. I don't think he's going to be replaced in the starting lineup before this season ends. A very, very good question here. What about Texas allowed Williams to dominate while Edey was just 2 of 6 from the floor? Is it matchup dependent? Who is going to be more effective? It's a great question. The one thing I noticed is that Texas was much more likely to help on Zach Edey than they were on Travion Williams. For the most part, they left Travion Williams in a one-on-one island. For the most part, when Zach Edey tried to put the ball down and go score, especially on his shot attempts because he was fouled so much, but on the shots that he took and either made or missed, there was another body there a pretty good amount. Part of me wonders if that was because Texas was relatively worried about Travion Williams passing. I don't know. I've been very outspoken about this, that I think, when Travion Williams has one-on-one matchups, he doesn't always look to score. And I think at times probably should. He was an all Big Ten player last year. But I do wonder if that was part of Chris Beard's thought process there. But Travion Williams was one-on-one with a smaller player. It was either Timmy Allen or Christian Bishop on him the whole game. That's a 6'7" guy who doesn't have the weight that Travion Williams does. He was able to get in position and score quite a bit. And that's where that matchup really comes into play, because we've seen Travion Williams struggle with bigger bigs at times in his college career. He struggled with Kofi Coburn pretty much his whole career. That's really the main example I have there. So maybe I'm going a little too far using one example, but I think those smaller guys who Travion can really get position on, he does a really good job of exposing that. And then on the flip side, there are certain games where Zach Edey's just so overwhelming. Like I remember last year, Zach Edey's freshman year, against Wisconsin at Mackey Arena. he was so overwhelming against the guys Wisconsin had out there. Micah Potter, I think, was who was out there for him. There's a name. Sometimes that just happens, and that's what happened against Yale. They didn't stand a chance against Edey. So I think it is matchup dependent, but I think all around, you just have to go with the hot hand. And Travion Williams wasn't fouled as much. He was able to get going. Zach Edey was massacred down there a little bit. I mean, there were some plays where he took legitimate shots, just for routine fouls. But, man, yeah, it was certainly interesting to see the difference in the way those two were defended. And then finally, will the free throw disparity and or Chris Beard's comments about it lead to changing the way Purdue is officiated for the rest of the tournament? I don't know. If we knew, that would be great. But you hope not. A 46 to 12 free throw discrepancy is as big as you'll ever see. Now, granted, all of it was real. Texas is super physical, pressuring the ball. They get caught with their, slapping the wrist quite a bit. Their big men were overwhelmed as can be. They fouled a ton. All of this was legit, but that 46 to 12 number probably isn't something that the NCAA loves being out there, regardless of whether it's grounded in fact or not. We'll see. I don't know that it's going to change too much, but, you really hope not, because when Purdue's getting opposing teams in foul trouble and really racking up fouls on big guys, it's just an advantage for Purdue, especially when they're knocking down free throws, even at a 71% clip. That's enough. That's enough to get places for the most part. It's those games when they're down in the 50s, down in the low 60s, that it gets really, really worrisome. And when you're missing a bunch of front ends of 1-and-1s. As always, a final couple random thoughts here. This tournament has been nuts. You have a 1 seed out in Baylor. You have 2 seeds out in Kentucky and Auburn. 2 3 seeds out, Wisconsin and Tennessee. This is crazy stuff. You have a 15 seed in the Sweet 16. You have a 10 versus 11 matchup in the Sweet 16. Crazy stuff here. We will see how things progress. I always say the first weekend you can have your upsets. For the most part, during the second weekend, I think most fans want the better team to win because you want to get as entertaining of a Final Four as possible just for the product on the court. We'll see what happens this weekend. The Thursday games are incredible. Friday games are fine, but the Thursday games are incredible. Another year, another underwhelming showing from the Big Ten. 9 teams entered. We are down to 2 remaining with the Boilers and Michigan as the last 2 standing. You kind of knew Michigan was going to do something when they got in at 17 and 14. It always feels like that team that gets in and everyone says, how did they get in with that record? They do it every year. They always win a game, it seems like. Michigan is really looking good at the right time. Purdue's playing well. Disappointing for Illinois. That's 2 years in a row they lose in the round of 32. That's a bummer. That really hurts for them. Wisconsin, another one that really hurts. Johnny Davis, great player. Great year for them. They can't get to the second weekend. Iowa falls apart after their Big Ten tournament run. Maybe, just maybe, winning the Big Ten tournament isn't a great idea. Illinois last year, Iowa this year, back-to-back years where that Big Ten tournament champion just hasn't looked the same after going through the grinder that is the Big Ten tournament. You had some lower seeds as well. Ohio State, Michigan State, fine, whatever. Indiana, fine. Rutgers was a disappointing loss that you took. I don't know who I'm missing here, but disappointing for the Big Ten, no doubt. And then finally, last thing, Purdue should be very glad it never has to see Marcus Carr ever again. Man, that guy's good. 23 points yesterday, 7 assists. He was excellent. He was excellent against Purdue for the majority of his career at Minnesota. Purdue got to see him one more time. Purdue got the best of him. That hasn't always happened over the years, but Purdue got things to go their way when they needed it the absolute most. They'll be happy to never line up across from him again. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for spending your time with me. I appreciate you guys so much. Until next time, if you don't follow the show on Twitter already, do it at Boilers Beyond. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Send over some questions if you have them. Tweet them to me, DM them to me, whatever works. We'll be back next week. I don't know what we'll be talking about. We will either be talking about the end of a season, or we will be talking about a historic streak coming to an end. Can't wait to talk about it with you guys either way. But until next time, enjoy what is an excellent week of the year.